Hello and welcome to Guns and Gear. You know, we have been fortunate here in coastal Virginia, and that many of the winter storms that the rest of the country has had to deal with, we really haven't seen the extreme cold and the ice and snow and things. Well, with this last winter storm, we got a little taste of that. We had some temperatures dipping down into the teens and into the single digits, and we've had some rain that turned to ice and then turned into a snow accumulation, which could really affect this area because we don't really experience that kind of weather often, and we don't have the resources to deal with it. But at any rate, this late afternoon, I was home and began to chip away at some of the ice and shovel some of the snow that had gotten onto the walkway coming up to the house and the sidewalk and the driveway and things of that nature. And I got to thinking that I may have a topic that I hope is interesting for a video, and that is talking about self-defense and carrying a firearm and the cold weather and the attire that we have, and some of the things that we use to keep ourselves warm. Now, I gotta take this hat off. I'm inside now and it's nice and warm inside. But in particular, I wanted to talk about how we protect our hands in the cold weather. Now, many of us choose to carry a firearm for self-protection, and we're going to have to consider, when the weather changes and our attire changes, how we even get to that firearm. I mean, if you have like a heavy shirt on and long john shirt under that, and then you have a fleece over top of that, and maybe a parka over top of all that, we've always been told to dress in layers, right? And layers is very effective. But that is a lot of material that we got to get past to even get to our firearm in many cases. So we're going to need to address that. Something else we need to address is our hands. In the cold weather, if we're going to be out in any extended period of time, we're going to need to provide some cold weather protection for our hands. And with that comes a whole set of skills that we're going to have to build in order to use a firearm with our gloved or protected hands. I'm really not going to talk about mittens and things of that nature. I don't think I should. That would be a very poor choice. Great for keeping your hands warm in very cold conditions. But mittens, you got all your fingers all tied up in one pocket, and then you have your thumb sticking out there, so you obviously can see that there'd be issues. I'm going to talk about gloves, and a lot of this is going to center around the size of firearm that you carry. It's going to center around the size of your hands and how it relates to that firearm, especially when you add gloves on there. Even thin gloves are going to affect your dexterity. It's going to affect the feel of the firearm in your hand, and more importantly, the manipulation of the trigger. So you're going to have to self-evaluate that with the equipment that you have. I would advise you to, hey, look at some of the gloves that you have for cold weather. Go ahead and take your concealed carry firearm, unload that, take that ammunition, put it in another room, and try some dry fire practice. Try some practice in getting to your firearm and drawing that firearm and being able to do all the different manipulations with that firearm that you need to do. And you will quickly see that there's some skill sets that you need to develop there. Now, I got a few examples I want to show you in gloves and in firearms and how they relate to one another. First off, I want to show you a shooting glove. Okay, this is an insulated glove, but it's really designed for shooting. And this glove is very similar to many of the different kinds of hunting gloves that are out there, in that if you look at the fingers, right, you'll see that the trigger finger, right, and the thumb have a much less material around them than the other three fingers and the rest of the glove. And that's specifically for being able to manipulate that trigger. Now, you will learn that the more material that you have between your finger and the trigger, the less dexterity you'll actually have. dexterity is greatly affected by the thickness of material between your hands and whatever you're trying to work with. I learned that very early on with my profession, right? Since I work with high voltage, we have to wear very thick rubber gloves, and they're very stiff, and over top of that we have a leather gauntlet to protect that rubber. And it's very difficult to perform even simple tasks with those gloves on. So we had to develop dexterity in order to do our jobs, right? So when wintertime came and we were outside of an energized zone and we didn't need those protective gloves on, the winter gloves were a heck of a lot easier to deal with, but still there's a skill that you need to develop. There's dexterity that you need to develop with the use of those gloves. A glove like a shooting glove or a hunting glove that has the trigger finger with a lot less material on there, that's going to aid you. It also has a leather backing in the palm area in order to give you a grippy surface to have a better hold on the firearm. Now, if you have smaller hands, you'll notice that your firearms feel a lot bigger in your hands, and that may be something that you have to consider. Even when you have large hands, the gun is going to feel bigger in your hands because of the material between your hands and the firearm. That adds to the size, and so you're going to have to get used to that and to learn how to deal with that. Now, here's some gloves here that are they're work gloves, okay? But work gloves are basically designed to give you a little bit of dexterity in the different fields that you may use. And they can help. They might be decent choices for firearms, but these are colder weather gloves, and that's the reason that I chose to show you them. The first is this is a Carhartt glove, and got some pretty thick insulation there, and it has the Gore-Tex membrane and leather construction, so it's kind of grippy for the firearm. But once you start getting into the colder weather gloves, I wanted to show you with some of these firearms maybe some of the challenges that you may have. Now, first up is a 1911, great design, but you'll notice it has a very small trigger guard, right? And with these gloves on, these thick winter gloves, I cannot get my finger inside that trigger guard. But there is an advantage to a 1911, and one of the advantages is it's a single action firearm, so you don't really have to manipulate the trigger very much to activate it. Another thing, and guys, these guns have been safety checked several times because I've tried to make this video several times. At any rate, one of the advantages is that the trigger itself, it operates by moving straight back, and that is an advantage because if you can engage any part of the trigger face and begin to add pressure there, you will trip that trigger in a very consistent manner. Now, even though I cannot get my finger inside the trigger guard, I can get that first third part of my pad of my finger onto the edge of the trigger face. And so that allows me to add that pressure and trip that trigger in a consistent way and fire an accurate round. Now, that has come with practice. All right, that has come with practice. But other guns I have more difficulty with. And one firearm I'll show you is a Glock. Okay, this happens to be a Glock 31, and but it's the same size as the Glock 22 and the Glock 17. It's a service size Glock handgun. Now, again, no magazine, no ammunition, but the design of this trigger is quite different. You'll notice that there's not a whole lot of room inside the trigger guard, and I cannot get my gloved hand inside the trigger guard. But unlike the 1911, I cannot engage the trigger by getting a hold of the edge of the face of the trigger. And that's mainly because you had this little piece of plastic up here, right? Everybody knows that. And you had to depress that before you can engage the trigger. So I had to cram more of my gloved finger inside the trigger guard. And when I do that to the point where I can get to that piece of plastic in the middle and push it in, I've already begun to engage the trigger. And to me, that's unacceptable. I know that you're not supposed to put your finger on the trigger until you're ready to fire, but I still want the firearm to fire on my terms and not due to the fact that I've began to engage it by sticking that gloved finger in there. Now here is a Smith & Wesson M&P, and this is a service size M&P 40. Okay, and you'll notice right off the bat there's a lot more room in the trigger guard there. And even with this thick glove on, no problem at all for me to get my finger inside the trigger guard and engage the trigger. Okay. Now we'll go ahead and change gloves to this glove here, which is more of a modern design of a work glove. Okay, this is made by Duluth Trading, but you'll notice that it does have the thick insulation. It has a waterproof membrane, but it also had the leather palm of this. The fingers are articulated in a way that provides a lot more dexterity, allows you to use your hands a little bit easier and still give you that cold weather protection. Now I do have the exact same problem with the 1911. The trigger finger cannot get inside the trigger guard. But just like the Carhartt gloves, I'm still able to get that first third of my pad onto the edge of the trigger and manipulate the trigger in the same fashion. And I also have the same issue with the Glock. The trigger finger does not fit inside the trigger guard, and I had to cram my finger in there to get to that little piece of plastic to push that in. And when I do that, I've already begun to engage the trigger. Now the M&P with this Duluth glove have plenty of room once again to be able to manipulate that trigger, and I'm still going to have to learn the difference in the manipulation because it does feel different, and I'm going to have to get used to that. I still can operate this firearm effectively with the gloved hand. Now here's a couple other firearms quickly. I'll show you a Beretta 92 FS. A lot of room right there. I can get this thick winter glove inside there. Now this firearm is a double action, single action type of firearm, but even in the double action mode, plenty of room for me to get in there and manipulate the trigger. Finally, I thought I'd show you a gun that, you know, if there's a manufacturer of firearms that I own that have a lot of room in the trigger guard, I would have to say it's the HKs. Especially the USP series of firearms. This happens to be an HK45, which is an extension of the USP line, and you'll notice that they have huge trigger guards, a lot of room inside there. This is another double action, single action type of firearm, and even still I can get my finger in there, get that middle third of my pad on the trigger, and begin to manipulate the trigger in the double action mode. So another good choice. You know, the HK45 and the HK-P30 are, in my opinion, amongst the most ergonomic firearm handguns that I own. And I got to tell you that the P30 is especially ergonomic because you can actually replace the side panels and the back straps to tailor fit a firearm to your liking. Okay. So that firearm in particular, you could have different side panels and back straps for the summertime when you don't have, you know, any gloves on or anything, and then have different ones on for the wintertime if you wanted to change the feel of that firearm with the gloves on. So this is just information for you to consider. All right, like I said, it's going to make a great deal of difference with different size hands. It's going to make a great deal of difference with different size of firearms, okay, especially when you add a glove to that mix. Can you imagine if you have large hands but your chosen firearm for carry is maybe like a Ruger LCP or one of the other smaller small 9mm or 380s that are out there and available to us today. Very easy to carry, but they may present challenges and using them with gloves on your hands. So these are issues that we need to go ahead and figure out, and because we do not want to figure these things out, sort these things out while someone's trying to kill us. All right, so thank you for watching my video. As always, I certainly appreciate it, and remember to shoot straight on the range and in life. Thanks.